Hi there, my name's Rob Smith, tour guide working in London with a group called Footprints of London. And today I'm going to talk all about a place about Rainham in the London Borough of Havering. Now, I'm often asked as a tour guide, what is the most historic part of London? And a lot of people might say, oh, the City of London, dating back to Roman times. I'm going to say a case for Rainham today, which has got a record of people living there right the way since the end of the last ice age. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the things you can go and see in Rainham, and hope you'll maybe want to go and pay a visit yourself. So thanks very much for listening, and let's share the slides. Yes, so Rainham used to be a tiny little village in Essex up until the 1960s, but as Greater London was formed, it became part of the London Borough of Havering. It's a place always associated with the River Thames, and the River Thames is one of my favourite things to take people on walks about. So if you're not familiar where we're talking about, Rainham is in the very east of Greater London, in the London Borough of Havering. Here we've got the M25 and the River Thames obviously over here. And quite famous for Rainham marshes. This is a bit of marshy ground, which you can still explore today. Although it has changed a little bit because silt has been dumped here from the River Thames during dredging during the 20th century, it still looks pretty much how London would have looked before humans came to settle here. So there's been marsh on this site going back to probably about 6,000 BC, so 8,000 years ago. We've got some dramatic records of climate change in the London area from Rainham. So before it became marshland, there was forest here. And some of that forest has been fossilized below the sands and muds of the River Thames. And they started digging it up in the 18th century and finding these bits of trees which had turned almost as hard as stone. And you can still see some of this down on the River Thames near Rainham Marshes. So the marshes form when there's some climate change and the forests come to an end. And the marshes actually form a way of communication for people getting along the river. So there's evidence of trackways, which were made by putting planks of wood over the marsh, which date back to early part of human habitation in the Stone Age. Well, later on in the period we call the New Stone Age, where people have started to become more farmers rather than hunter-gatherers, there's evidence in Rainham there. And they found a large enclosure which dates back between about 4,000 to 2,500 BC with pot shards in it in the Rainham area, which showed the sign of being quite a large settlement. The site was excavated in the 1930s, and so the archaeology that was done there hasn't really been done to modern standards. So it's still a little bit of a mystery exactly what this settlement was. Later on in the Bronze Age, people were living in the Rainham area, and they've left this intriguing records. This is a collection of broken Bronze Age hand axes, which was found just outside Rainham in a place called Wennington. And the Wennington hoard, as it became known, is really interesting. Lots of theories about what it could be. So these are all broken hand axes. Maybe this is a Bronze Age rubbish dump. But if that was the case, why wouldn't there be other things apart from the hand axes? Perhaps it's a ceremonial site. This is very possible. The broken hand axes were all found on the four corners of a square, as if they'd deliberately been put in a pattern. Maybe this was a peace treaty, a sign of saying that a war might have come to an end and we should break up all the axes which had been used for that. So that's a possibility. Maybe it was that these items were just now redundant and about to be melted down into something else. It was the finds come from the end of the Bronze Age and into the Iron Age. Well, there's also been found an Iron Age settlement at Rainham, so roughly where the Asda is in Rainham today. There's a large there was a site of a large Iron Age ring enclosure, which they think might have been a very large Iron Age site indeed. So before London had been built by the Romans, there was this settlement here in Rainham. Well, there's also sign of Roman habitation in Rainham. There was a farmhouse there, and very possibly it might have been a farmhouse that was given to a Roman soldier who might have retired from military service. Perhaps someone from nearby Chelmsford or Colchester was given a farm down by the river. But after that, also some wonderful Saxon finds. And this is a drinking horn, which was found in Rainham. The original of it now in the British Museum, but you can see this wonderful replica in the London Borough of Havering's Museum in Romford. So Rainham was a large Saxon settlement, possibly one of great importance. And there is a theory that possibly Rainham might have been the home to the king of the Saxon kingdom of Essex. Well, Rainham had a really important location for crossing the Thames, and there's been a ferry on this site going back to the medieval period. So this is due to the founding of Leesness Abbey on the south side of the River Thames. And there, the man called who had found it, Ricard de Luchy, one of the right-hand men to the king. He had land on the Essex side of the river, and so he needed to get across to his lands on the south side of the river. And then pilgrims start to use the ferry. So it becomes known as the Pilgrim Ferry, initially for people going over to Leesness Abbey and then onwards to Canterbury. So this is a good link, an important link between Essex and Kent, which went on for a very long time. It was also a crossing point for boats going from Gravesend to London, and people would pause at the Rainham ferry to pick up the ferry there. So it became an important ferry point and a place for Londoners to come out for the day in Victorian times. So we've got a nice picture from the, well, this is from the early 20th century showing people at Rainham ferry, and people would come down the River Thames from London for a day out in Rainham. So it was a popular place to come. The pub on the left-hand side, known as the Three Crowns, sadly no longer there anymore. Well, it's a fantastic church in Rainham, and its history goes back a very long way. So the church possibly founded in Saxon times. There seems to be some remains of Saxon material in the church, but it has some beautiful Norman arches, which you can go and see inside, and a wonderful Norman doorway you can see over here. The church has a really beautiful secret inside, and that's actually a piece of graffiti. So the graffiti is a depiction of a ship. It might be a little bit hard for you to make out at first, but have a look carefully, and you can see along here is the hull of a ship, and then we've got the masts running up here and here and here and here. So this could be a type of medieval ship called a cog, and cogs would have called into London from France, Portugal, from the Baltic. So very possibly it would have been a site that people would have seen from the river. Also, carving graffiti into churches was often a thing done by ship's crews as a way to get a good look on their journey. And you can see similar things to that in Rochester Cathedral. So maybe this is what this depiction is. But we think the graffiti dates back from the 1300s or possibly as late as the 1400s. Either way, it's one of the earliest depictions of a ship in the London area, a city that made its fortune from ships and the river. It's quite exciting to see this early depiction of it. You can also see it on the ship centres. The ship centre is a fantastic little community venue run by the church. It's a little tea room where you can call in, and they've got the ship on their sign, so you can see it perhaps a bit more clearly on the sign over here. Now, one of the things that Rainham really dominates Rainham is fantastic Rainham Hall. So this is a property now looked after by the National Trust. It was built for a ship's captain called John Hull, who built the house in 1729. So when it was built, it was possibly a little bit old-fashioned compared to other houses, but this was a sign of the money that Hull had made from shipping. So he was originally from the northeast of England and had been part of a family shipping business, bringing coal from places like Hartlepool along the river, along the sea, and then along the river into London. And originally based in the northeast, but he then moves his business down to Wapping and spends some time there. He then decides to move his business out to Rainham and builds this house in 1729. That's quite interesting, the timing of doing that. Just a little bit before that, about 15 years before, there'd been a huge flooding of land in Dagenham, just slightly closer into London than Rainham. And that flooding had led to lots of mud getting dragged into the River Thames as the tide was going out. And this ended up forming a sandbank in the River Thames. The whole episode became known as the Dagenham Breach. And there was a great fear that the Dagenham Breach would block the River Thames and stop ships coming laden with goods from, say, the East India Company or from the Caribbean, would stop those goods coming into London. Eventually, the Dagenham Breach was cleared after much effort, and it took nearly 15 years to clear. Possibly, Hull didn't believe that it was ever going to be cleared permanently and decided to move his business up to Rainham so he would be outside the range of the Dagenham Breach. Well, either way, Hull ends up draining the stream that runs off the Thames in Rainham, called the Ingrabourne, and makes it suitable for ships to call. And so he has some of his ships coming in there, and then builds this grand house so he can oversee the business. There's nothing like being on site and being able to oversee what's going on. And the bedroom that he had in this house would have been able to see the quay that was built in Rainham for unloading goods. Now, he expanded his business, and one of the things he particularly focused on was building materials. So he had access to lots of those to decorate his house. So these absolutely beautiful Delft tiles you can see inside the house. So Hull was based there. The house has been through lots of different uses, including being used as a school for a while, and was almost in a completely desperate state, but taken over by the National Trust now, and you can go and visit. Well, out in Rainham Marshes, someone really transforms this in the early 1800s. This is a man called William Sturgeon. So Sturgeon was someone who believed that merino sheep would be suitable for grazing on the marshes. So merino sheep, as you can see on the left-hand side, their wool is very, very fine. They're originally from Spain. For a long time, they were exclusive to Spain. And in fact, there was a death penalty for exporting merino sheep. But in the late 1700s, the explorer Joseph Banks brings some merino sheep back from Spain to Kew Gardens, where they become part of George III's collection. Now, during the time of George IV, he had other interests apart from collecting animals and farming. And so William Sturgeon inherited the sheep and decided to get them to graze out on Rainham Marshes. There was a lot of skepticism whether this would work or not. These fancy sheep, would they like the wet conditions of the marshland? But they did very well there. And then later on, he exports them to Australia. And all the sheep that now are in Australia are descended from the merino sheep that Sturgeon sent from Rainham Marshes. There's actually a Mount Sturgeon in Australia to celebrate that fact. Well, 100 years after that, Rainham marshes become used in practice for World War One, and it was turned into a large rifle range. A lot of the recruits into the regiments, which were from the London area, would spend their last time in England in Rainham marshes, and some of them having to camp out in the winter in Rainham marshes got very, very sick. So it forced the army to build a more permanent camp. Around the marshes, you can find evidence of the old firing positions from the rifle ranges. So they're hidden away in the marshlands. But there are a few other things to do with war from there. I think this slab is a mooring point from a barrage balloon from World War II. Well, talking of World War II remains, down by the River Thames in Rainham, you can find this forlorn sight of these ferro-concrete barges, which were made in World War II. It's thought they were probably used for moving fuel around, possibly in the run-up to the D-Day landings, although we don't seem to have any evidence they actually crossed the channel. They're more likely to be supplying ships out in the Thames estuary. But either way, they were left here as part of flood defences in the post-war era, and now slowly sinking into the mud. They almost have a look of being beached whales, but they're great places to come and watch birds who like to land out on them. And the whole area along the riverside at Rainham, a bird watcher's paradise, with a beautiful sound of the oyster catcher, one of the great things to listen to while you're walking that way. So do come out with me, and I'll show you around the Rainham area. If you have a look on our website, footprintsoflondon.com, I've got lots of walks in East London and Essex along the River Thames. So I hope you'll enjoy some of those. So do come along, and thanks very much for listening about Rainham.